Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I think we're waiting for a few more people to join us. So while we're waiting, let me give a quick intro. For those of you who don't know us, we're Darrow. We're a legal intelligence company helping plaintiffs' attorneys detect, act upon, and litigate impactful cases in a number of practice areas. So I think let's start. Welcome everyone to our webinar on food mislabeling. I'll introduce myself. My name is Rachel Postman. I'm a former litigator and compliance attorney. And here at Darrow, I serve a unique and really fun role of working with the legal intelligence team during product development, specifically in the consumer protection space, helping bring these tools to market, working with you all. So it's actually really fun. And Maram is our fearless leader in consumer protection. So I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Maram. I'm an Israeli attorney, and I lead a legal intelligence team focused on consumer protection violations, including food mislabeling that we will be discussing today.
So yeah, maybe you can kick that off, Maram, and talk a little bit more about what is catching your attention in food mislabeling. What are you seeing in the space?
Yeah, so just before we start, just to level set, I think most people here are probably familiar with the space. But when we talk about food mislabeling, we're really looking at situations where the claims on the front of the label don't fully match what's actually in the product, at least from a reasonable consumer perspective.
Right. So can you give us a few examples of what you see a lot?
Yeah. So, for example, the no artificial preservative claims or all natural claims. You may see these claims on labels on products, and in the ingredient list, you'll see ingredients that are there to prevent spoilage or make the product last longer, meaning they are functioning as preservatives.
Right.
Uh,
And this is the type of claim you're seeing a lot of
A
right now?
lot. Yeah. It's very common, and this is why we're focusing on this area right now. This space is evolving really fast, and let me know what you think. But we're seeing courts that are becoming more selective about which cases move forward. And in the same time, we're seeing different types of claims emerging all of the time around different ingredients, preservatives, sweeteners, flavoring agents, et cetera, et cetera.
Are you seeing broader trends in these claims? I know we'll get to it a bit later how you track them, and it's super interesting, but what are some of these broad trends that you're seeing?
Yes, so looking at broad trends and a lot of data, there's some patterns that keep coming up. A lot of these cases today focus on ingredients like preservatives, flavoring agents, sweeteners, and sometimes we see on products combination of all of these in the same time. And we're seeing more variation in how these claims show up in litigation, in regulation, and on the labels themselves. And each one of these combination combination or qualifier, we're seeing different nuances.
Right. Well, that makes sense because there's always new ingredients developing actually, new ways to make these claims. We see a lot of creativity in that. Maybe you can give an example of some of this nuance that you see.
Yeah, so the biggest trend we're seeing right now, and I'm sure like everyone heard about, is the citric acid, the preservatives claims, or other similar ingredients like ascorbic acid or lactic acid. And now we see more phosphates with the claims like all natural or no preservatives or no chemical preservatives, and other variations as well. And these claims are being challenged differently in litigation. So, for example,
Could you say more about like how specifically the different ones
yeah,
interact with with the legal claims?
yeah. So, as I see it, the no preservatives claims are more about function, what the ingredient is doing exactly in the product. So it doesn't matter essentially if the ingredient can exist naturally or not. If it's being used to extend shelf life or prevent spoilage, that's where the issues comes up in litigation. But for the all natural claims, for example, or the no chemical preservatives, both of them also deal with source and processing and the perception of consumers, and how the ingredient would be understood by a reasonable consumer, whether it's perceived as
Right.
chemical or natural. Yeah.
Right. Right. I mean, of course, that's a factual question, right? That would come up later, but it is pretty confusing, all of these to me, at least,
Yeah,
as
for me as well.
a reasonable consumer who reads labels very carefully. Um, and yeah, so and I think regulatory activity does not necessarily make that easier. But in terms of litigation, I think uh, there's some of my sort of favorite recent cases would be for the citric acid litigation trend. I call it them citric acid cases. Hayes v. Kraft Heinz. I think we've talked about this case because it's a good example where their mac and cheese product that we all know and may have loved
I
or
love.
still love as a guilty pleasure. They claim no artificial preservatives on the front label. Um, the product contains citric acid, sodium phosphate, and plaintiffs allege that these were synthetically processed. And that case did pass motion to dismiss and is ongoing. And Maram, I know you're like data queen. You have a lot of data and stats in your head. Do you have a sense of the volume of or percentage of cases that we've seen in this space in recent years that are like this one, that are essentially citric acid, uh, no
Yeah,
artificial preservative claims?
yeah, definitely. I think the citric acid and the no preservative claims are the biggest wave right now. It's like 80% of the data that we're seeing. It's really, really high.
And of course, though, we're also seeing some changes in this and the nuances that, as you said, right? I would assume in the data that's emerging.
Yeah. So, for example, the all natural flavors or no chemical preservatives, it would have different nuances and different um, challenges when it comes to litigations.
Right, and qualifiers, and also one thing that I think is interesting. For example, there's the case Palmer versus Coca-Cola in Central District of California right now. Um, these are for the Sprite and Fanta products, I think. So
Yeah.
they use these typical citric acid, sodium citrate, potassium citrate preservatives, and the claim being challenged on the front of label claim is 100% natural flavors, which is a little bit different, right?
Yeah. And how do you see it like affecting the litigation right now?
So Coca-Cola is arguing that these ingredients, to your earlier point about the function,
Mm.
they're arguing they function as a preservative rather than a flavor. So the 100% natural flavor claim is not false. It's accurate on its face, and because it's not referring to those ingredients at all, which, you know, it really depends on how, again, a reasonable consumer would see it. Um, we'll see what happens. It's still pending motion to dismiss, whether the judge chooses to address that, reasonable consumer aspect in motion to dismiss, which is arguably improper, but sometimes, it happens.
Yeah,
And we'll have to see, but I think it really shows how important these little details and nuances are, as you were referring to
definitely.
earlier. Um, and on that note, I think I think we should talk a little bit about the tools you use to pick up on all these details, to track all this data, um, and monitor trends and actually create new cases.
Yeah, so because this area is very confusing and dynamic, as we said, it's important to have as much as possible data coming in. So we start by looking at cases and litigations to identify patterns, and the different combinations, like the citric acid, no preservatives, for example. And once we have these combinations, we score them based on outcomes, how often they are litigated in court, whether they survive motion to dismiss or lead to settlements. And then we group them into different tiers based on strength. And once we have that, we move to the label data side. So we collect and scan hundreds of thousands of products of labels. We cluster them based on these trends and map them into tiers. And lastly, we enrich the data. We add additional data layers like the manufacturer information, how much brands each manufacturer has that we're seeing violating the law, the product revenue, and the sales data that helps us estimate the potential size and the impact of the violation.
Right. And I mean, one of the things that really impressed me, because I've gotten to see early versions of this tool, it's incredible how much data is actually out there on food, grocery sales.
Mhm.
There's even some, you know, many public sources of data on this that you guys pull from that I didn't know existed. So that's really interesting, and that's one feature that I think is really cool. There's many cool features. Is there one feature or capability that you're super excited about right now that you want to highlight?
Yeah, so the whole like first stage of collecting the data and analyzing it. And as you said, it's public and it's out there. You just need the right tools and capabilities to analyze, cluster, scan, and download and stay up to date. So the work that we do in that regard is enabling us to see the violations really, really clearly and very fast. Instead of spending, manually searching hours and hours, websites and Amazon and Instacart and Kroger, for
Right.
example.
Right, or walking down grocery store aisles, visiting 10 different Targets and
Yeah,
Walmarts
taking
and
pictures
different.
of labels.
Right, which is something that people do, and that's even more challenging. And I have a question about this because, one thing we hear a lot from our partners and lawyers out there litigating this space is it's very challenging to track label changes over time to make sure they match up to, what the claims that you're making, because one little change in the label can change the entire case. And is there a way that the Darrow tool addresses this issue?
Yeah, so it's a very well-known challenge, right? Like in other consumer protection areas as well, not only in food mislabeling. And this is why we're tracking label versions over time. And as you mentioned, it could change over time. It's not static, and companies keep updating the language, add disclaimers, and change qualifiers. So we look at the current and most up-to-date versions using APIs and the public data, but also try to find these old ones and collect the historical ones so we can see if it's still ongoing, how long it has been in place, and how the violation has evolved.
That's incredibly helpful. That's definitely a feature that I'd be excited to get my hands on if we're litigating these cases. And it really sounds like this tool does everything except, order the groceries and cook your dinner for you, unless
Yes,
that's planned future.
in the future. No, it's very user friendly tool.
Yeah. Definitely really helpful in the rapidly evolving legal and regulatory landscape that we've been talking about as well. Um, because we do expect these labels to change and new
Yeah.
ingredients to be added.
Which new regulations, for example, like if you can say more on that?
Well, as you know, the FDA doesn't necessarily issue new regulations super quickly or easily, and typically they'll issue these letters to industry, and they did issue one such letter earlier this year, about artificial colors claims. They're saying We're exercising enforcement discretion. If you make these claims, it's fine as long as you don't use FD&C certified synthetic dye. I mean, actually, they're not saying it's fine. They're saying we won't enforce against you for this narrow category of front label claim as long as there isn't one of these certified synthetic dyes. So from the FDA perspective, that's fine.
Yeah,
Um,
but it's the use of naturally derived colors would be more problematic or less problematic for brands and companies.
Right. Well, that's an interesting question, right? Because the FDA wasn't making any decisions and specifically said it wasn't about the propriety or compliance of using of what other colors were used or uh, how that would be perceived. The FDA doesn't make any decisions about consumer protection laws generally, right? So I could easily see this situation where, you know, beet juice is a very popular natural color, potentially naturally derived, not artificial on its face,
Yeah,
but like all of these ingredients, like citric acid, when you start manufacturing it industrially for widespread use,
mm,
it's probably chemically processed, and so making a no artificial color front label claim when there's chemically processed beetroot dye, I could see that becoming very similar to the citric acid situation and
got
actually
it.
leading to more litigation.
Yeah. And hey, have you seen similar situations like this in the past?
Yeah, well, I think something somewhat analogous happened in 2019. FDA issued a letter to industry on no added sugars.
Mhm.
And there's also a lot of lobbying efforts that go into this on the part of various food ingredient industries. So um, they they essentially said, for these sugar alcohols, some other ingredients like allulose, um, you can make, again, they'll exercise enforcement discretion and not enforce against companies who use no added sugar labeling on the front and have these ingredients, and also these on the nutrition facts panel, excluding the calories and grams of those ingredients from the sugars and no and added sugars um, lines on the NFP. And there has been and of course, there's explosions of products, thousands of products with sugar-free and no added sugar, front of label claims with all sorts of different alternative non-sugars and variants of that. And there has been some litigation on that as well.
Yeah, it reminds me with the Chobani lawsuit, right? With the zero sugar yogurts.
Right, Franco V. Chobani.
Yeah.
Uh, that's a huge front of label, zero sugar part of their brand, and the allegations there was that the use of allulose, while they weren't challenging the nutrition facts panel
Mm,
breakdown, they're saying it's still misleading to consumers, still false, because that is actually classified as a sugar technically. It's just the way it's processed in the body is supposedly not impactful. Um, and that case actually was dismissed. It's up on appeal to the Seventh Circuit. Um, Oral arguments were held recently, and actually, Seventh Circuit records oral arguments. I went and listened. It's pretty interesting. I highly recommend that. Um,
yeah.
instead of Netflix this weekend.
And another two new trends to follow, to track, the zero sugar and the
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. We
Um,
keep my eyes on that for sure.
yeah, I'm sure you will. And I'm sure you'll catch that trend and be on top of many others and leading many others, Maram, as you do. I think we have a little more time we'd like to leave for a few questions we see coming in. Um, Here's a good one. How much evidence do courts require to support mislabeling claims in early stages? I can take this one. Uh, so in early stages is actually fairly basic, with the nuances, of course, but courts are looking for a clear mismatch of front of label claims, um, and then what the ingredient list is, and then of course the client, having bought that product, the label having to be the one with the challenge statements on it, with that ingredient list, as we were referring to earlier. Um, and for example, the no preservatives together with citric acid or phosphates that function as preservatives, or I think it's more common now, the no artificial preservatives. I think there's often the qualifier. But still, as we've seen, this is a viable claim, because of the potential to mislead about the processing of that ingredient. And then, of course, as the case goes on, the bar will go up as it does for factual and technical evidence. Right, Maram? I think you see some
Yeah.
lab testing in some of these cases.
Right. So as you mentioned in early stages, it's like courts are accepting well-pleaded allegations on the ingredient function or how a reasonable consumer would understand the claim. Even if it's not, they're not expecting full proof yet. And as the case progresses, the bar goes up, and yeah, you
Right.
probably will need test labs for some cases for the sourcing claims and all of that.
Yeah. Well, you make a good point, Maram, about well pleaded, because it is really it does really, like, pleading very specifically and pleading well about the ingredient and its function and the claim and how those interact does seem to really matter here a lot.
Yeah,
I'm sure you've seen that as well.
right.
Um, and then this is a good one. Are you seeing companies adjust their labeling in response to this wave of litigation?
Yeah,
Maram, you want to take this? I can see
yeah,
you.
definitely we see that. We're already seeing companies updating their labels in response to the wave of litigation. So, for example, you would see more vague language and softer language. We just saw recently the no fake stuff qualifier, or no preservatives but with added ingredients, which doesn't mean much to consumers. And we're also seeing more disclaimers coming in. And because we have the capability of comparing different versions of the labels using our tools, you could see the differences over time and how that is evolving. But yeah, in many cases, it's less about a full change of the product or the label, but it's more about adjusting how the claim is framed, and changing some words here and there just to reduce legal risk.
Right. The no fake stuff one was pretty clever, though, I think. That
Yeah,
was
no fake
that's
stuff.
Ben Stiller's new soda, right? Yeah. That's very vague.
Or
So
creative. Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's actually all the time we have for today. We're so sorry if we didn't have time to get to your question. We'll definitely get back to you as soon as possible. And thanks everyone for listening. And we hope you found it interesting, and we'd love to hear from you if you want to work with us on these food labeling cases, or if you just want to hear more about what we do in consumer or other domains at Darrow. Please reach out. You can do that via the contact@darrow.ai email, or feel free to reach out to me or Maram directly. Our emails are first name dot last name @darrow.ai. Thanks so much.
Yeah. And thank you, Rachel. It has been super interesting to work in this area. And thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you joining us today.